Hello, dear educators. Welcome back to another episode of Bala and Bala Perspectives on Education. This is the second season, and we have a set of brand new topics lined up just for you. But before we get into the topic of the day, let me introduce the two Balas who always join me on this show. To my right is Mr. G. Bala Subramanian, former Director Academics of CBSE. Sir, welcome to this show.
Thank you.
And to my right is Big Brain Giri Bala Subramaniam, better known as the quiz master or well-known quiz master of our country. Welcome, Big Brain.
Pleasure.
The topic of the day. We have heard about this topic a lot, and many of us believe in this topic, but at a school level, sometimes we're a little confused on how to implement it into our respective classrooms. Experiential learning, making it happen. So today's discussion is going to be all about experiential learning. So the first question is to both of you actually. Sir, I'll start with you. The terminology experiential learning is suggestive that experience and learning are two separate processes or two separate concepts, and they cannot exist parallelly. Is this true? Do we really have to bring a concept into picture called experiential learning?
Well, if you very closely look, you will find that most of the learning is born out of an experience. We normally say that all kinds of sensory experiences, the sight, the listening, the feeling, all these things, all five sensory inputs lead to learning of one kind or the other. How this learning happens is a $1,000,000 question. The brain scientists have found that hundreds and thousands of sensory inputs go into the brain to synthesize a particular type of information which is provided to you in a nanosecond, right? That is the speed of the learning. So to differentiate experience and learning, to distance them from each other will be a mythical exercise to me. That. But yes, what has happened over the period, the reason for this question is that in a large number of classroom interactions, teachers have been delivering certain concepts to the children, right? However, the relevance of these concepts into real-time situations and life experiences are not given. So these concepts remain isolated in the brain of the children, and they do not know where to apply, how to apply, and therefore there is a suffocation of learning. And therefore, we have a practical class over there, we have got demonstrations in the classroom, all these things trying to put across over there. So, but what I would suggest is that learning leads to experience, experience leads to learning. So they are interdependent, they are mutually supportive, they are mutually scaffolding, and therefore in the current context, the need for using the experiential learning has come because focus on examinations and marks and others have been too much, and therefore the children have distanced experiences and imaginations of the cognitive domain. That has resulted in a problem, and that's a context in which the stress on experiential learning has been made by the NEP.
All right. Big Brain, your view.
Well, two parts. One, of course, is yes, there is a need to bring in, like Sir so rightly said, a practicality to the learning, which is what one is referring to here in the name experiential. I have personally been at a school, I certainly do not want to refer it, but in remote rural area where the children were known to be well prepared and extremely successful, and they had a history of cracking IIT exams and so on and so forth. So I was invited to visit that school, I went there. I had to interact with quote unquote aspiring IITians, if I may put it with due respect to them. I did a very simple thing as a quiz master. I had to interact. I didn't want to give a sermon. I saw a ball in the room. I took the ball, I held it like this, I dropped it. I said, what did I demonstrate to you? To my shock, not even surprise, nobody in that room was able to say that is the third law of gravity. They were not. They said, sir, aapne ball giraya. I said, what is the science? No answer. So, but 2 or 3 minutes later, I asked them, tell me the third law of gravity. Tuck, 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 tuck. Everybody knew. Tell me the laws of gravity. Everybody knew. Which means they were prepared for the examination and the question, but they did not even know remotely what a ball dropping meant. So there is a dire need to integrate that. Second, I would look, yes, I know experiential learning sounds like a, sort of a clash in itself, the well put question. I would actually look at it as application oriented learning. The learning needs to be oriented towards application. So that's my way of looking at it.
Now, I get what you're saying because as a child, my mother had this problem with me. Because as a child, if nobody could explain to me where I could use what I'm learning, I would conveniently forget the concept that I was supposed to learn.
Yeah.
But if they would tell me that, okay, this is where you can use it and this is what you can do, I wouldn't forget it even after the exam. I would always remember. So I get what you're saying when you say application and it's very important.
Yeah, so even at our quiz shows, when we ask questions like, there is an aircraft going and you see a trail and the trail is of white smoke that you get to see. Why? You find children looking at you bewildered in amazement. I mean, I'm not presenting something from the Marvel universe.
Correct.
It's curious science, but that curiosity has not been demonstrated.
Right.
So, very important though.
All right, let me move on with you with the next question. Is all learning experiential?
Yes, in theory, I would believe yes. All our learning comes in various forms from experiences. There is some learning that comes without the experience or prior to the experience, and then we may experience it. So it could be in both forms, but I would believe yes, at least to a very large percentage in normal life, yes, it would be experiential.
All right. So, in the context of a school, do you think experiential learning is being confused or misinterpreted as experimental learning?
Yes, to a large extent, I would agree with you because very often when I go and interact with schools, and many teachers have told me, what is this experiential learning, sir? We already have got physics laboratory, chemistry laboratory, computer lab, and that's where the problem comes, Experimental learning is confused with experiential learning. As I said, an experiential learning could be a cognitive experience, an emotional experience, a psychological experience, and experiences of various other kinds over there. So all that contributes to the even for example, when you teach a poetry, right, and when the child goes to a place and sees, for example, the daffodils when you teach, and the child is going to have a look at the lake, you'll lakeland and the lake, his experience will be entirely different over there. So when you talk of experiential learning, it has nothing to do with technology or science-based subjects. Art has as much experience, music has so much of experiential input, and therefore it's a very broad-based term we need to convey to the teachers. And experiential learning is also not oriented towards an end product, because very often what happens in the school, you do in the lab, you know what is the result, and therefore you work the experiments on the result. But when you have an experiential learning, it could be even a project where you don't know what is that outcome. The result may not be known. Even that is a kind of experience. You get a wrong result, to me that's a kind of an experience in that. So I think the experiential learning is something which is educating you at every step in the learning curve, right? And if you look at that, I think the schools are in doing that.
All right. So I would like to continue with you for the next question as well. Is experiential learning transferable and fluid?
Well, that is a very, very intelligent question that you have asked. Experiences are, facilitative of learning. And these have got to be articulated to be applied to a situation. Let me give an example to you, right? You have been driving a scooter years before where it had a, brake, which you had got gear, whatnot. Today you are getting a gearless, scooter. And you say, I have experienced only driving a, scooter with gear, and I can't do this. It can, but you transfer your experiences. We have been driving with cars with manual brakes, and then we moved into technologies with 32-bit technologies, whatnot. Today we are getting electronic cars where you can just dictate by voice that a brake could be done. So skills are changing, and all experiences have got to be transferred, and transfer of learning is a very important thing, whether it is in a classroom or whether it's in your learning curve in a higher education or in a practical life. So that is a place where you bring your knowledge and skills to a synergy, right? To a synergy, and then that's where your common sense also works together. So I think this is the way that people learn over a period of time. There is nothing called a rigid formula in which you transfer the skill.
All right. So Big Brain, my next question is to you. Is experiential learning a trigger for curiosity and innovation?
Oh, absolutely yes. Absolutely yes. In fact, I had a phenomenal set of teachers who taught very differently. Bagless, we were actually asked to keep our textbooks away consciously, and they would just teach or narrate stories or whatever they did the way they did. I don't think the adjectives existed, but the practices existed. So I still remember, for an example of experiential learning and how the curiosity stays, I was taught about the Roman bath and the Colosseum with a dramatic story that our history teacher told us. We sitting in the class were transported from that class into an imaginary world that he built and said, this is the Colosseum and so many thousands of people are seated. It's a round amphitheater. And no aids, no visual aid, no drawing, no projector, no TV screen, nothing. That man created an image in my mind which was an experience. 3 decades later, that teacher's imagination I saw in reality when I got to go to Rome. And trust me, it was the same images which fit into that reality for me. So it can create a huge amount of curiosity. For 30 long years, I had wanted to experience that. Similarly, Merchant of Venice. A storybook like Merchant of Venice, Shakespeare's story, can easily be read out. Today, like Sir said in another episode, these books are all down to 50, 60 pages or 100 pages. We had the actual versions. Not even the actual versions, my teacher would enact the roles.
True.
He would call people in the class. Even to this day, one of our classmates is remembered for Shylock. Even today. Coincidentally, he is a banker and a moneylender. So, experiential learning can shape your career.
How do you think it connects to innovation? We covered the curiosity part. What about that?
Now, take people like me. My entire learning revolved, or rather my learning, maybe what I choose to leave out was part of the formal part, I don't know. But a lot of things that I learned which stayed with me came from these experiences, which is what actually helped me when I became a quiz master to realize that quiz shows should not be checking whether you know answers to facts. And therefore, if you look at our quiz shows, it revolves around a lot of innovation, lateral thinking, multiple intelligences. See, the whole idea is experiential learning should foster your thought process. The thought process should facilitate better decision making. Better decision making should enable better problem solving. If this cycle can get imbibed into your system as a DNA change, then in a normal process you become a solution oriented person. And if you have a solution oriented world, I think we've got huge number of problems getting solved by itself. But it starts with experiential learning in classrooms.
All right. Sir, what kind of freedom will teachers need to engage using experiential learning as a tool in their respective classrooms?
Yeah, that's a very important question because a lot of creativity and innovation in the schools don't happen because of the rigidity of the curriculum, one. Second, the rigidity of the process of delivery through a lesson plan, articulated lesson plan in the classroom, and because of the rigidity or the focus on the kind of results that we want over there. So all these three are the limitations in that. But in a classroom, when a teacher delivers a concept, teaches a concept, you know, no single child is taking the way that the teacher is teaching. Okay. As a matter of fact, statistically, they found that the same idea, concept given by a teacher is interpreted by a million ways by every individual child in the classroom. So no two children think the same way. But we all believe that we have taught and they have learned, but the way they have learned is entirely different. Therefore, the teacher needs a kind of freedom to interpret, to project, to interact with every child according to their learning pathway, their learning aspirations, and their learning styles, and their learning limitations. Therefore, in a classroom, the learning is absolutely, it has got to be individualistic curriculum interacting. The question that you will have is whether the teacher has got a time for that, whether that's possible in a structured classroom is a question. And probably, they say if wishes were horses, one could ride on them. And that's exactly what's happening. Nevertheless, what I believe is that the time has come that we need to move beyond what is called the structured lesson plans in the classroom, that this is what has to happen at the end of my, learning objectives are very, very important. Curricular objectives are very, very important, but we must keep them open. We should not say that this is exactly what should the child learn out of that. Therefore, I think we need to move beyond the existing philosophies of pedagogy. Right? Because there was a time when we have unilayer, unipolar pedagogy, model. Today, we have a multi-layer, multipolar learning happening around with so much of inputs and resources for learning, and therefore we need to rethink and re-engineer our methods of philosophizing the pedagogy in the classroom.
All right. Big Brain, what about you?
Well, I have a simple view on teachers being provided the freedom. The freedom needs to be provided irrespective whether it's experiential learning or not. The teacher needs to have that freedom. We recognize that, and it is possible in education in this world. I'll give you an example. There's so much of zoology that gets sung today. I don't want to get into the details of that, but about Finland's success in education, Singapore's success in education, etc. What is the singular undertone of how these countries have succeeded? They've provided freedom to the teachers. Now what happens in our country, a lot of managements, owners of schools, etc. go on what is now called educational tourism. They go to all these places, they see these schools, they come back and say, we should do what Finland schools do. But are you willing to provide the freedom to the teacher to do that? So it starts at home with basics. And I think if that freedom is given and the right environment is created, it's extremely possible to do it and scale with it.
All right.
I just wanted to add a small anecdote, which I normally talk when I do with the programs on experiential education. This relates to a ship which was anchored in a particular harbor, and there was a problem with the ship, and the pilot was not able to start the ship. So he waited for a week or 10 days, and all engineers came and worked on that. Nothing could happen over a period of time, and he was absolutely depressed when somebody came in the village and told him that there is a mechanic in the village who can help you out do that. But he had no idea about the chip and all that. So, I mean, the captain was absolutely unhappy what this old man will do. But finally, the old man came, and what he did was he took a complete round of the ship, right, and did nothing. But he went to one particular spot and took a hammer and just hit it twice, and the ship started. Now, 2 days later, the old man sent a bill for $1 million. And now the captain said, well, you just gave 2 strokes with your hammer, and you are charging for $1 million. He said, yes, you are right. I have charged only $1 for the 2 strokes, but now the rest of the dollars is for finding out where I should strike. And that talks about experience and experiential learning.
Wow.
Well, with that wonderful anecdote, my dear teachers, we have come to the end of this episode of Bala and Bala Perspectives on Education. I really hope you have enjoyed this episode and you will join on the next episode of this show. We will see you there.